Welcome to the Journey to Prosperity for All, a program where we look at and reflect on the activities of the PPPC government in office for the last 2 years. My name is 𝐘𝐄𝐀 and I'm your host for this program. For this discussion, I'll be speaking with the Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport, the Honorable Charles Ramson. Minister Ramson, thank you for joining me.
Well, it's happy to be here.
Definitely. Before we get into everything that we want to talk about for this discussion, I want to ask you, how was your ministry, or what state was your ministry and sector in upon your assumption of office in 2020?
Yeah, I just want to, if I can just take you a little bit, maybe a step behind that, to go deeper into understanding why the entire process of leadership for the country and how we change leadership is very important. When it comes to deciding who's going to govern the country, there are a lot of people that say things. There are a lot of people that are going to come and tell you, well, we're going to do a better job than this other person or this other group. And you had a government that was in place from 2015 to 2020. And this is on our second anniversary, even though it feels much longer because we've done so much. What people have to assess is what area was performing better than where we are right now in the previous administration. So you can say a lot of things, but when it comes time to proving what's the quality of your leadership, it's a lot of it is based on the proof is in the pudding, is in the eating. And there is no sector that I can find that is better during the 2015 to 2020 period. And in total, everybody would say, unless you are like a hardcore political activist that is faithfully supporting the APNU or AFC, unless you're a hardcore that just doesn't want to see anything different, in general, you would have to say that the country is moving in a far better direction, and that a lot of that has to do with, in fact, all of it has to do with just better leadership. There's better energy in the country, there's better vision about the country, there's more things being done. People are aware of more things being done. The president is getting into the details of the issues and defining the direction that we're going, a vision for us, and then also motivating our team at the level of the cabinet and the government so that everybody is moving aggressively towards transforming the country. And that's what Guyanese want. First of all, we want a better life, for sure. That's important as individuals. We want a better quality of life. But we also want a better life for our families too. And we want to see that the country changes and it modernizes, so that when people come to our country, or that when we go and visit other countries, we know that, well, our country is far better than another country, or that we're moving in the direction of becoming a developed country. That's pretty important. It's also pretty important that our incomes improve as well. So all of that has to do with how we are developing as a country, and it has to be done through leadership, and the government has to lead that. And when people come and say, well, we are going to be a better leader, or we have been better leaders, well, it's been 2 years now. I think people have been able to see enough now. And just turning to my sector, which is something that I can speak very clearly about, which is getting to your question. You asked what was the state of my ministry in? Well, it wasn't in a state. It wasn't in a ministry. The previous administration thought so little of the areas of culture, youth, and sport that they relegated the ministry or disbanded the ministry and turned it into departments that didn't have a seat at the table of the cabinet, where you as a minister, which is very important, it's very important to have that seat at the table. It's also very important that when you're amongst colleagues who are cabinet members too, who have executive responsibility for the country, that you build those relationships so that when you need to get things done, you can call your colleague and say, this issue is up, this individual needs some help, or this area needs some help in this area, for this sector, that you can pick up the phone and do that. You don't build those relationships unless you are at the seat of the table. You don't have the ability to advance your case if you're not at the seat of the table. So the absence of culture, youth, and sport, but particularly young people at the level of the cabinet is really important, and really damaged the country. It removed the voices of young people, folks like yourself, where you know that the interest of what you find, or your interest, is being represented in a firm way, that the person who holds the office they get it, they understand how important an area is, they understand what it takes to develop it, and that there's a clearly defined strategy and methodology of moving that in that direction, as well as taking as many people who are stakeholder or who are just interested, who are stakeholders or who are just interested, that you're taking as many people as possible with you. And it's very complex, but it's very important too. So for our ministry, it wasn't a ministry. It was one of the most diabolical decisions that I think that the APNU AFC made. It was one of the worst decisions to remove the voice of young people at the level of the cabinet. And we had a government of geriatrics. It didn't reflect who we were as a country, because Guyana we're a young country, but we're also a country that we've got attitude. We're trendy. We're also like to be fresh. We don't want to be an old country where we're outdated. We want to catch up. We want to jump the curve and get into good states of development. So I think just being able to reestablish that was a very important decision by this new government and by the president, and the fact that also that you have a young minister as well, and you've got a young cabinet, it really gives a lot of strength and voice and fortitude and power to what are the programs that are and projects that are being developed for these areas.
And so as we talk a little bit about the specific initiatives that have been launched by your ministry, one of the most powerful of those is the Cultural and Creative Industries Grant. Tell us a little bit about that grant. What came behind it, why was it originated, and how it has been able to progress over the last 2 years? Yeah,
so a couple of things. Like for the area of culture, most people would just remember our department as just being responsible for Mashramani. And while Mashramani is a big operation for our country, it's not the only operation for our country. And there are a lot of young people who are talented, and the creative industries is a very important industry now, where individuals can really turn their skills or their talents into money-making opportunities. And that's how we had crafted the Creative Industries Grant, the Cultural and Creative Industries Grant, to support the entrepreneurship aspect of what we're doing. So that's really, and to get it to that level too, a lot of people need support. Now, I wish we can be doing more, but from what we have seen from the first year, which was $30 million, we had 30 awardees. We have seen so much come out of that support already that had it not been there, they wouldn't have had that support. So it's amazing that a lot of young people have been able to benefit from that. And when we were looking at the budget for 2022, and it was a decision whether to keep it in or not, we were already seeing the overwhelming response and the success of what the support did. And we had to keep it in there because it was just so favorable.
And in addition to that, the ministry has been doing a number of other things to boost and enhance the image of culture in our country. What are some of those things that has been done by the ministry to directly put Guyana's culture on the forefront?
Yeah, so what's been important, at least as far as I'm concerned, is because we're responsible for our national events.
Yeah.
What's been really important is the modernization and just raising the overall standard of our events, which allowed me to really start to position in my mind, which now we want to do it as a country, which is that we want to become a premier destination for world-class events. And that led into, focusing on securing the CPL, and then the president's initiative of the cricket carnival. But initially, when we got in there, it was COVID.
Yeah.
And we had to do our events via streaming, virtually. But what's also a feature of virtual events is that a lot of your flaws are magnified, and it becomes glaring because you have 100,000 people that are going to be looking at it online, and they're going to be looking at it for good things, but they're also going to be seeing some of the bad things. So when it came time to move in that direction, which was something that I had to make a decision on what to do, knowing that we are the Ministry of Events too, then and moving it online, we were taking a big risk. And there was a lot of preparation and background work that had to go into changing the culture of the department, but also the ministry, which is about raising our objective and our attention to detail and standard, which is something that I'm also very pleased about in terms of how the ministry transformed. Because when I got there, the ministry it didn't have. First of all, it wasn't a ministry, but all of the departments, they didn't have the sense of direction. They didn't have their goals. They didn't have their mission. They didn't have teamwork. They were operating in silos. There was a lot of conflict too. So this individual wasn't getting on with this individual. I won't call their portfolios, but there was no working together. All of that now had, in fact, within the first year or so, we're still continuously working on it, because teamwork culture is an ongoing, living, breathing creature. But all of that we had eliminated, which was that kind of conflict can fester,
yeah,
and it can damage the organization. And what we have now in our ministry is that we have a strong culture of teamwork and cooperation, and it doesn't matter if you come from the sport department, if you come from the culture department or the youth department, we're all working together. We can rely on each other. If you need help in this area, folks can pitch in and help. And that's what we've been doing. And we're trying to build that strong culture. So in relation to changing our events, we had to really raise the standard to now where you can take our shows, our national shows, and put them at any modern country, and it won't be out of place. Like, it won't stick out like a sore thumb. Where you can look at it, whether you're here or you could look at it in another country and say, gosh, that was a pretty spectacular event.
Yeah.
And that's something I'm extremely proud of, because prior to that, I don't remember going to national events that we would say, as young people especially, that they were spectacular. You won't go and say that. But today, people look forward to what we're going to do, because it's pretty exciting. Yeah. So that's something else from the culture standpoint that we've really had to work on hard to do, and it's worked. Another one of the areas that has really done that we're working on right now is just securing we secured additional funding, which was $100 million for a revolving fund, a cultural revolving fund, some of which the president has already given some direction on. But we've coming out of that, we've restored the Guyana Literature Prize,
yeah,
which APNU took away and replaced it with nothing. And it's surprising to me that you would want to claim that you care about the culture area so much, but you take away an area that is supportive of literature and writing and creative writing, young people doing creative writing. Otherwise, they won't have had the means to be able to do it. And you replace it with nothing. So you're going to create a total vacuum,
Yeah, right.
for which people who are, let's say they may have an interest or a talent in a particular area, they have no way of advancing that talent. So that's another area that we advanced and secured. And also you're going to see coming out of that revolving fund too, you're going to put on our Guyana Festival, the One Guyana Festival, which is going to be a big event at the Cricket Carnival. So there are a number of initiatives that we were able to get that wasn't there before, and I'm happy with the direction that it's going. Another thing that we're trying to do right now is to secure for our artists specialized training for getting their songs onto Spotify and YouTube, and how to really market it, so that they can start to get earning from overseas. And then we're working also with the embassies to create like a performance visa, so that when they go in and they have like a certificate from us, because we're building that in tandem with a cultural registry, which once you are doing work with the ministry and we can say, we're satisfied with the work that you're doing, you can form part of that registry, and based on that you can get a certificate and go and get your visa, your performance visa, so that you can go away, do your performances, make some extra money, and then you can also use that to get a CSME, so that you'll be able to get a certificate and go any part in the region, and also get some opportunity to make some money too. So it's trying to really use the business area to let our cultural performers start thinking about how we're going to be able to make money from our craft, because that helps to fulfill or create the cycle of repetition and practicing on what you're doing and then making it better.
And as we continue the conversation on culture and how that has been enlarged over the last few years, another big aspect of that are the heritage sites. Where is the heritage sites? What was the state, the condition of these heritage sites that are under your purview in your ministry, and what works have been done to rectify, restore those very important places?
Yeah, so unless you appreciate how important heritage is, you won't really start to think about where and how you would provide funding for it, and if it's necessary. Part of our budget this year, a lot of it in the culture area for capital works goes into heritage. It doesn't go into, let's say building a building. It goes into the heritage work, so that we can make these sites a lot more accessible, so that people can use it. Because I've been to many, many places where they have these heritage sites where tourists would come, or even locals would go, just so that they can go and get an understanding of the location, what's the historical information of the heritage site, and that alone is an economic driver. I mean, I just returned from London and Birmingham in the Commonwealth Games, and there are millions of people going into London right now, just so that they can go to see all the heritage stuff. They're not there just to go and buy something from the shop or whatever, which is still important. I mean, they're going to be buying when they're there. But what attracts them there too is the historical part of the country and the sites. So that's one of the important things that we're doing, which is preserving that heritage and trying to restore it. So an example, which doesn't come out of my budget, but it's something that was advanced to, the restoration of City Hall That's a big contract, but it's a big decision that the government had to make just to restore it. Now, that's something that when it's done, just like the St. George's Cathedral, that's something when it's done, people will want to go and take pictures there and come to the location to go and visit it, etc. So the other part that we're going to be doing in relation to our heritage sites is to do a lot more promotion, because when it comes time to like people understanding what could be done in the country, there's a lot of people would want to do it if they can do it fairly easily and they can make a good day out of it. We're trying to do that. So one of the locations we're working on right now is in Hog Island for our windmill there. You can access the location, but now we're working on building out that area so it could be accessed.
That's a big thing, and as we turn our attention a little bit to something that gives me a lot of interest, or brings my interest and a lot of activity, there is the sporting realm of our country. Now I want to ask you, the overall atmosphere of the sports world upon your assumption to office. It was in a COVID situation, of course, the pandemic was there. What direct interventions were made, even in that COVID environment, to boost and regain that sporting environment?
So let's go back a little bit, because you have to really understand whether sports in general, through their associations, whether they felt as though they had a working relationship with the previous ministers. So, and when I say the previous ministers, APNU had 3 ministers responsible for the Department of Sport. And when I asked associations, they said they couldn't meet them. They had 3, but they couldn't meet them. Now, if you're not able to meet, if you're not able to talk, if you're not able to work together and build that partnership and relationship, what you know you can work on and what you can plan for the future, or get some of the intrinsic information that's pretty important so that you as a planner can plan, right? So they didn't have that before. They didn't have the opportunity to have that engagement. I made that a feature on the assumption of office to have those monthly engagements, to the point where now we don't even need to have the monthly engagements anymore. It's now like we're phone calls away, right? So it's now moved beyond this kind of formal engagement to where the relationship is so strong that I can pick up my phone right now and call any of the sports presidents, and they can call me if for things that need to get done immediately or in the immediate future, and things that we need to plan on, we can arrange meetings, etc. Now, how important that is when you think about what they had before. If you can't build with the folks who are representing the sport, who are you going to build with? How are you going to build? So let's use the budget, for example, as we've got the largest budget in the country's history for sport, and it's something that I'm pretty proud of. And it's also something that the president himself is a big believer in sport, and he backs sport in a major way. I mean, he just recently had a meeting with the president of FIFA while they were at Shogam in Rwanda, which I've never seen the previous president do that. I've seen the GFF get invited to meet the president at the office of the president. At State House just a few weeks ago or a couple months ago. The previous president didn't do that. And that shows how important sport is to President Ali. And that's translated into the largest budget that we've ever had for sport. So when we had our budget presentation, shortly after it was presented, the sports associations issued statements saying how satisfied they were with the relationship that they had with the Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sport and the minister, and the allocation that we had. That's never had happened before. So, and I can use maybe cricket as an example, which has been cricket is probably our most popular sport. It's probably our national sport, or our unofficial national sport. Instead of trying to resolve the issue of the cricket board elections that had been plaguing us for so many years, which probably close to 10 to 12 years, right? By the time I got into office. Instead of them trying to resolve that, the previous government went and had an act that was passed unanimously in Parliament. So with their support when they were in opposition, they had provisions suspended through a court order that they consented to. It's pretty complicated in terms of how it is explained, and unless you have like legal training, then you won't really understand how I have never heard a situation like that in legal terms, that a government would go to a court and consent to the suspension of provisions in an act that they were part of passing, and that they were the government responsible for administration of it. So instead of trying to resolve the issue, they made it worse. So they protracted it. We were able to get that resolved within the first, I think, 6 months or so, or maybe 7 months of assumption of office. So much was that a relief to the cricketing world that Sir Clive Lloyd issued a statement which was published where he said, "Congratulations to me on getting this issue resolved and being determined to have the election held," etc. That's something that was so important that for 12 years couldn't be done, and they made it worse. And if you don't have that strong relationship with the sports associations, you're not going to be able to plan properly. You're not going to be able to work together and advance your program and develop a structure so that young people could get a chance both to play and advance their talents.
And more than just forming those relationships, those bonding relationships, direct work has already been put into place in many of these sporting fraternities. And I want us to talk a little bit about the works that have been done on community grounds, the rehabilitative works. How much money has been expended, first of all, to accomplish that? And what has that done for the young people, the athletes in those areas?
Before we get into the ground stuff, what I would tell you is that one important thing that we did, two important things that we did, but they're both connected. One was the first sports conference that we've ever had in the country's history. And then the second is that coming out of that, because we did the consultation on this, was the Sports Academy.
Yeah.
So the Sports Academy is the first in the region, right? Now, you would think that this is something that is, as a sports person, an academy is fairly a sensible thing to do. It didn't exist. There's no part in the region where there is an academy for multiple sports. They may have an academy, let's say the High Performance Academy for cricket in Antigua or Barbados or something. But there's no sports academy for multiple sports. Guyana, we did it, and it's working. It's starting to work, and we did it in partnership with the sports associations. I didn't just go and say we're going to start a sports academy and we're just going to take it over and all that kind of stuff. We didn't do that. I did a consultation with them. We formed our ideas, we built it into a paper, and we launched it. And it started. It's working. Everybody that's connected to the various sports where it started, they're very excited about it. And some of the fruits are already starting to show itself, because when they had a recent badminton tournament, they were showing me that some of the kids who were playing in the sports academy, were training in the sports academy, they were the ones that were winning. So it's an example of how the program that we're doing, that it's working. Now, going into community grounds. So what I discovered was, first of all, this was the worst condition of community grounds that I have ever seen in this country. And I was pretty disturbed, actually, to know that in many instances, when, especially in the rural areas, so outside of Georgetown, even villages on the East Coast, a lot of times those community grounds and community centers, it's their only place, their only avenue for where they can go and do social things and or play sport or have some kind of cultural activity, or it's just kind of where they can bond and learn things or whatever, hang out. It was the worst condition that I've ever seen it, and it wasn't until that I realized how important those community centers and grounds are to villages and people generally, in areas generally, that we really started to direct a lot of attention, a lot of innovation, and a lot of resources. So even though we haven't spent far more than the previous administration, we've accomplished far more. And that's because of how we were spending our money. Choosing the projects based on the locations, the state of the condition of the location, and what we wanted to achieve. So knowing, for example, that accessibility is very important. If you as a parent, you want to send your kid to a community ground, you don't want them to walk through mud just to get to the community center. Mm-hmm. So choosing the projects were so important. And the president, when I started off on the journey, he said he's giving me a target to light 10 grounds within our 5-year term. We did our 10 grounds in the first year. We lighted 10 grounds in our first year already, and we're going to be doing more, because so instead of trying to go for the most expensive, that is not the model that's necessary for community grounds. So you would need lights for the national stadium if you want to host international games or a 𝐘𝐄𝐀 game or something like that, because it has to be televised, it has to be standard lights. That is you got to go through that technical information and detail to qualify. Community grounds don't need that. They're not hosting international games. They need lights for sure, and it needs to be bright enough, and it needs that it's safe and strong and sturdy, etc. And it needs to be efficient. Mm-hmm. So I designed with my engineer, we sat down, we worked and figuring out what is the most efficient way of delivering lights to grounds. And we broke it up into components, and we did it. We delivered 10 grounds that have amazing lights. They are very strong, and it's expandable. So the infrastructure is in there. So if you, as your community, you want to go and buy 2 more lights or 4 more lights, all you got to do is plug it up. Mm-hmm. So it's modular in that way and scalable. But as far as the infrastructure, that infrastructure is going to be there for 50, 60 years. I can guarantee that, because it's solid 50 feet concrete poles that are in the ground. It's not going anywhere. The wires are run underneath. So you don't have to wonder about whether the tautness of the wires are gonna cause the poles to collapse. Nothing like that. Those poles are gonna be there for 50 years, and it's made such a difference to the community. The projects as well as the lights, they've made such a difference to the community. Now they can have games at night, they can host events at night, they can have weddings at their community center and their ground. We also delivered to so many grounds the driving lawnmower tractors, which was the big problem was maintenance. That was never done before. We did it now. And that's really because of how we decided that we were going to use the money in a more innovative way so that we can empower people and empower those communities. They can take charge of their community centers, etc. But it's really to give them the means to be able to do it.
And finally, as we wrap up our conversation, Minister Ramson, how would you describe the government's vision overall in the sports sector, in the culture sector, in the youth sector, and as a whole country? How would you describe the government's vision to continue to advance and develop Guyana?
Yeah, so what, in one word, it's a transformation, right? So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to deliver the prosperity to the people of the country, but also the country has to transform. And the way that you're going to be able to transform is that you have to make big investments. Those big investments will open up connectivity opportunities, business opportunities. If without having that infrastructure in place, you're not going to be able to advance trade, advance business, and have the big and important structures that a modern country needs. So that's why you see President is talking so much about big investments and having a bold vision about where he wants us to go, and also who are our strategic partners and who are the folks that we want to invite in to show them what the country is about, because they will want to invest in the country too and where the opportunities are. And government has to facilitate that too if we want to have rapid transformation, which is something that is very important to me, very important to the government, but it's very important to all of the people of the country. So I'm a citizen just like everybody else. You know, I first and foremost, I live here. So all the stuff that comes with being a minister, and that's new in the sense that prior to that, I wasn't a minister. I lived here. What do I want? I want a better country. I want a better country for myself. I want a better country for my kids. I want to be able to know that when I send my kids down the road, that they're going to go to the shop or wherever, that they're going to be safe. And that if I get a heart attack, God forbid, that I can go to the hospital and we got really good health care, and that our education is world class, and our roads, our airports, our ports, all of that are very important in terms of knowing what our country needs to transform. And everybody in the cabinet, that's what we feel. But you have to have, at the level of government, you have to know where you're going. You have to know how you're going to be able to take the country there. And you also have to have the coordinated teamwork, which we have at the level of our cabinet. In fact, I'd say this is probably the best level of teamwork and best level of teamwork at any cabinet that I've ever seen and been around. And it's very important for us to have that so that we can advance the president's vision and the overall direction of the country. Because as a government too, you also have to be able to unite the entire country. As many people as possible, you keep communicating and saying where we're going to be going and what we're going to be doing, and so that people know what to expect, they know when to expect it, if so that they can also start planning for their own lives. And I think that when it comes to what's the alternative, no one has been able to say that on the big plans that we have, that their idea is better. So when you listen to, let's use the gas to energy project, for example, that we're doing, which is a big transformational project, right? Cheaper electricity, cheaper energy, using our resources to give us that reliable, consistent supply of energy and electricity, and then using that to create fertilizer and cooking gas and everything. You've heard the president speak at length at this. But when you're using, in terms of what is the plan to transform, when you consider the alternative, we've heard the opposition say, well, their idea, it's better for them to put the gas in containerized ships, ship it on board onto land, right? Then put it into trucks, the gas, put it into trucks, and then take the trucks onto where the plant is to power the electricity plant, right? That's what I'm using this as an example of, if you're providing leadership to the country, you want to say, well, your idea is better, right? That's the first thing you got to say, that the idea that is being used now is the wrong idea, and versus this is a better idea. Well, that's their idea. Our idea, which is a fairly straightforward, simple idea that has been certified, and it's also been the method that has been applied by most other places that use natural gas. We run a pipeline straight into the turbines, and we create electricity and run it into your distribution feed. Simple, but that's a very useful example of what is it that our ideas that you have, that the opposition has, that's different, that's better than us. No one has been able to say that their ideas are better than us. That's the first thing. No one has been able to say that their track record of implementation is better than ours. Because you just had your five years. You spent $1.4 trillion in that 5 years. And what have you been able to accomplish? Durban Park. 2 stones down from here, and I could show you, they got some junkies and stuff living down there with hanging clothes and stuff on a line, and some of them even moving a sofa in one of the stands. That is their track record of things that $1.4 trillion, right? In that last year in government, from when that budget was passed to when they came out of office, $420 billion was spent. $420 billion in that, from January 2019 to August 2020, $420 billion. Show me what was done. Show me what was done. Now, on the other hand, you're seeing, you're feeling, you're hearing, you're knowing about all the changes that are being made, and all that's important for everyone in the country. So I'm still trying to figure out many times, when the folks who try to criticize, you're criticizing, but you have to be able to say, is your idea better than us, than ours? And are you capable of implementing your idea? Do you have the teamwork? They have already shown that they don't have the teamwork in opposition, let alone what it would be like in government. In opposition, they're showing that they don't have the teamwork. So, for example, you hear already that the AFC is ready to depart from the APNU-AFC. In their own camp, folks don't even turn up to Parliament, right? On every session, their crew doesn't even turn up to Parliament. In the subcommittees, they don't turn up at times. It shows that they don't have the coordinated level of teamwork, and they're not serious about their business. So I'm just, many times I'm bewildered when I hear anyone try to criticize any of the stuff that we're doing, because they just don't have the ideas, and they don't have the leadership capability to implement the ideas in any event.
Minister Ramson, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk with us extensively on the Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sport. This has been The Journey to Prosperity for All. I'm your host, 𝐘𝐄𝐀𝐑, saying goodbye for now.